Fantastic. Yes, Alex, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I have been asking for an opportunity to do that for quite some time. So, yes, I am extremely happy to be here. It's one of those topics where, it sits between the technical domain and the business domain, and as people may know me a little bit, I've been with Neo4j for a decade now. So that I sit between those two domains a little bit as well myself. I love business, I love sales, I love building solutions for clients, but at the same time I'm also someone who likes to hack with Cypher, and have some fun with that. So I'm in between those two things as well, and that's basically the reason why I wanted to do this talk, because what I've been seeing with talking with clients and talking with users is that it can be quite difficult to get a graph project up and running. There's some symptoms that we see time and time again. Like in the early stages of a graph project, everyone's like super enthusiastic and yeah, this is fantastic and this is so innovative and this is so new and let's get going with it. And then all of a sudden that enthusiasm seems to die out a little bit. And then all of a sudden you get these messages. Yeah, we're going to do it next year, or it's not a priority today, or we don't have a budget for it, or whatever, or the current solution is good enough. All of these excuses for not getting going with graphs, right? And that bothers me, not just because I'm a commercial guy. No, really, it doesn't bother me because of that much, really. But at the same, I really do get annoyed by that, because it feels like it is hampering innovation. It's really stopping us from making more progress. And then I ask myself, what do we know here? What is real and what is already material here? And there's a couple of things that we really clearly know from talking to people, from working with clients, but most of it is actually in the technical domain, right? So we know this, we track this, we understand this. Graph databases, graph platforms are primarily adopted by technicians, and they look for technical benefits. That's normal, right? And one of those technical benefits, one category of technical benefits, is actually more long-term oriented. It's all about ease of modeling, or flexibility, or it's a natural fit for our domain, or those types of things. Like these long-term benefits that are real, right? But they're not necessarily driving like immediate decision making, right? Now, fortunately, in the technical domain, there's a second category of benefits that is actually very, very immediate. It's all about speed. Right? With a graph platform, you can do stuff that you can't do with other platforms because it's just way more efficient at doing that, right? It enables these workloads that we thought were impossible before, and all of a sudden they become possible, right? And because of that efficiency, there's obviously also hardware and operational savings that we can immediately quantify. Right? So there's these long-term benefits, right? And there's these immediate technical benefits, but they're both quite technical, right? Which is why it's important to try and realize that we also need to convert this into a business story, right? We need to try and relate those technical benefits to a value case that is more business-oriented, right? That people that have no technical background will understand as well. And very often that means that we're going to apply this. We're going to apply this to a very specific use case. And even better than that, we're going to apply it to a very specific industry, organization, and even person, right? Because we want to have a very specific conversation with those people around the benefits of implementing that technical platform that we offer, right? But here's the thing, even when we realize that, even when we do that, even when we apply these things that we already know, we still faced with a number of issues, and which is why I'd like to spend the next couple of slides and the next 10 minutes or so trying to explain what we don't know yet and what we need to think about a little bit more. Because reality is, and I'm going to try and peel this onion a little bit, right? Reality is that Right now, in this economic environment, if you're going to spend six figures, on a graph project, you better have a value case. Simple as that, because otherwise you're not going to be allowed to spend any money. You might be able to spend 5K here or there, but you're not going to be able to spend a significant amount of money on the infrastructure that you need to build a graph project, right? The second thing is, that even if we as technicians, we realize that there's these technical benefits, that doesn't mean that the other side understands that the people that hold the purse strings actually understand that, right? Being right is not the same as being understood to be right, right? We have to explain this. We have to articulate this to these people. And of course, the technical value just isn't the same as the business value. We have to get to know the business results, the business impact that this technical value is bringing to the table, that it's enabling. And then the last point, which is probably the dearest to my heart, I've been living by this for a very, very long time, is that we should realize that our decision makers have a very, very specific way of dealing with uncertainty. In fact, humans have an interesting way of making decisions in times of uncertainty. When you're buying a graph database, when you're implementing a graph project, you're doing something that you've never done before. Most people have never done this before, right? So as a consequence, they're making decisions with lots of uncertainty, right? And here's something that I'm hoping people have heard about already. Nobel Prizes have been given for this, and it's really, really interesting behavioral economical research, right, which is called prospect theory. When humans are faced with uncertainty, right, and this is not up for debate, this is just science, this is proven, right, they always underestimate the value and overestimate the risk or overestimate the costs. That's how we are wired, from the earliest days in the savannah, we were wired, we were grown, we were evolving to be like this, right? When we face uncertainty, when we don't exactly know the data, we're going to behave like this, right? And this is why, when you buy something new, when you buy something that you've never bought before, and you're faced with that uncertainty, you're going to actually, be reckoning with this. My personal story here is always the same one. It's about this beautiful little car. This is the first car that I ever bought. Opel Corsa, right? Back in the 90s. When I just graduated from school and had my first job, and needed to get into the commuting game. It took me months to make up my mind. It took me months to make up my mind about what car I was going to go and get. Why? Because I had never bought it before, and I was being faced with uncertainty. That's just how this works, right? And there's some really interesting research and some really interesting literature about how to apply this when you want to build a value case, right? So I have read a lot of books about this, and the best summary that I've found is in a book called Selling is Dead by Mark Miller, right? It's actually almost 25 years old now, but I still think it's super, super interesting because it applies to how humans deal with prospect theory, deal with uncertainty when they want to buy high technology, right? What Mark Miller basically says is this very simple equation, right? If the perception of value, PV, is not significantly greater than the sum of the costs, right? The monetary costs and the perception of risks, right? Then people are going to decide not to decide. They're just going to postpone it. They're going to stay with what they have, right? Because of uncertainty, if this equation doesn't hold true, they're just going to postpone the decision. And this happens all the freaking time. We see this enthusiasm at the beginning of the discussion with our users, right? And then all of a sudden they're like, yeah, maybe, next year, that type of thing. So if this holds true, if the perception of risk and the perception of and the costs need to be smaller than the perception of value, then what we need to do is we need to try and influence that. We need to work with our stakeholders. We need to work with our colleagues in our organization and try to influence this perception of value and this perception of risk. So how do you do that? Right? How do you build this case, and how do you influence these two factors? Well, I think that much of this is actually down to reducing the uncertainty by making it explicit, right? Make it explicit that what the value is. Make it explicit what the risks are. And of course, make it explicit what the costs are going to be. And you should realize that both on the risk side and on the value side, you're going to have quantitative factors, right? Things that you can jot down and that you can calculate and that you can objectively find hard measures for, right? That are not going to be easily disputed. But there's also going to be qualitative factors, soft factors, right? That are going to be less measurable, right? Including feelings and emotions, right? So we're going to have to deal with those. We're going to have to deal with this. And how do we do that? Well, I think the first thing that we do is we have the explicit conversation with our stakeholders, right? We have to help them. We have to help them, and we have to help them create these value cases by having a conversation. They don't always know the answers to it, but at least then we know that they don't know the answers, right? And we're always going to ask them, how are you going to justify this? And ask for specifics, right? And the key word, the key magic word that I've always used here is why. Why are we doing this? Why is this use case so interesting to you? Okay, because it will change the way we do things. Okay, why does it change the way we do things? Oh, because it will allow us to follow a better process. Okay, why will it allow us to follow a better process? Oh, because we won't lose that much time. You see what I'm doing here? Right? I'm constantly peeling the onion. Why? Until we get to something measurable, ideally. Until we get to something that we can write down on a piece of paper and say, this is why. This is why we're doing this. Right? So this is the most powerful word in the world. When you're trying to uncover these graph value cases, you want to ask questions. You want to engage in a conversation with the stakeholders and find out why. Another really powerful phrase that I'd like to suggest is, how are you doing it today? Okay. So you have this idea of this new use case. You think graph technology might be really interesting. How are you doing this today? Right? And dig into those processes. How do they work? Where are the issues? Where are the challenges? How do we improve this? How does the technology help with those improvements? Have there been any highly visible incidents, for example? Right? How are you doing this today? And who is impacted by those existing ways of working? Maybe it's other groups, maybe it's customers, maybe it's external people, maybe it's internal people, maybe there's a really important merger and acquisition, a critical business initiative that's going to be impacted by this. Okay, so how are we doing this today, and who's impacted by this way of working? And hopefully we will find specific factors. We will find specific factors that we can use to influence the perception of value, like, for example, reduction in hardware, shorter response time, real-time capabilities, fewer support calls. There's no limit to what this might be, right? And same thing for the perception of risk. Hopefully we will also find, specific ways to do that, right? We can, show them other case studies. We can have them call people. You can work with a partner, whatever it is, right? So there's specific ways to enable this. I'd also like to point out that their second big way for you to build this graph value case, right? Aside from having the conversation with your stakeholders, asking them why, asking them how they're doing this today, the second big way of doing it is really to dig in and to do your homework, right? And prepare for this explicitly. Don't assume that someone else is going to do this. So I would offer and I would recommend that you talk to people. Like you talk to people that have done this before at Neo4j, in the community, how did they do this? Do they have examples? Do they have inputs, right? And you can also rely on stuff that we have actually prepared. Obviously it's in our interest to enable you this way. And we've worked with, for example, Forrester Research, right, to build something called a TAI study, Total Economic Impact, right? So this is how you can actually look at some examples that Forrester has validated that basically says, this is how you justify a graph project. And we've actually done some spreadsheet work for you, right? We've actually tried to summarize this in a couple of Google Sheets. You can get these from your local Neo4j contact if you want, for recommendation engines, for master data management, for cybersecurity, for all these use cases, we have examples of how you can do this, right? So I'm going to wrap up. I'm at the 15-minute mark, I think. And I'd like to wrap up by saying, please don't stick to just the value, the technical value, right? Think about the business impact, right? Think about the fact that, people are always going to underestimate the value and overestimate the costs, right? And that this quantification step of value and risk is a really, really great way of reducing that uncertainty. Write it down, make a document out of it using, for example, the template that we can share, the Forrester template or a simpler version of that. And please, like Emil used to say, don't be a lonely document, right? Don't do it on your own. Connect with others that have done this before and use the material that's already there. With that, I'm going to wrap up and thank you for the opportunity of doing this talk.
Very cool. Thank you very much, Rik. Lots of love in chat. I hope now everybody understood how the emojis work. So I like to see them now. We had a couple of comments. So I'll post one in from Chris. Chris says, prospect theory is fascinating. As a business technologist who has 100 million plus business cases, this is so true. One good technique is foot indoor. Instead of huge business cases, do small business cases that build on success.
Yeah.
That's a good...
Walk before you run, right? I mean, that's a really great recommendation in any case. And I had one of my earliest mentors that used to say, if you want to eat an elephant, don't try it in one piece, which is, it's obviously a really gross way of saying that, you walk before you run. But I think this is very true and build on successes like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very cool. There is one funny one from Matt. They call it the I'm not pronouncing it. So high interest and stall.
Yeah. That's a really good one, Matt. Yeah, I'm going to remember that.
Constantly peeling the onion is very important. So a couple of people also say that. Yeah, lots of love, lots of clapping and thumbs up. So really good. I see you now got it to work. It's great. And then, there is maybe one tip from Stefan here. Very huge. It doesn't really render here in the stream, but if you want more, you could always check out post number 1 of how to make sound strategic decisions under uncertainty. Is that a podcast? I'm not 100% sure. But
you know what, Alex, if I may add, myself and Stefan, we actually had a lot of fun in full pandemic working on a set of podcasts and articles, and they're available at graphvalue.com. There's some good material there.
Sounds good. Okay, cool. Thank you very much, Rik. Need to wrap it up for the next one. Thank you for presenting today, Rik.
Thank you.